Welcome to a presentation on ways to live more sustainably and take care of our environment. Thank you to the City of Kingston for engaging CERES to do this. My name is Jane, I work in environmental education at CERES, and today I'll be talking about growing food, shopping locally, and making sustainable energy and transport choices. And I'm joined by my colleague Leah.
Thanks, Jane. Now, I also work in environmental education at CERES, and I join you here today as a fellow Kingston community member. So I'm super excited to be able to share with you ways in which to reduce waste and conserve water within the home.
Thanks, Leah. Okay, let's get into this presentation. I'm going to do a quick intro before we look at growing food and buying locally. I acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge the relationship between people and country, and I acknowledge country itself. I also acknowledge that we're facing an ongoing climate and ecological crisis. I'm grateful to all those who are working to protect our health, our earth and our future. We will succeed. The presentation we've designed today is around 4 chapters: local food, less waste, energy and transport choices, and precious water, and how our individual decisions and our collective actions can lessen our impact on the environment while also building our own skills and resilience. This is an image of the stunning Mordialloc Creek to Carrum area. Today we're going to look at ways to protect such precious land and marine environments and take individual action to help reduce pollution and global heating. During the health crisis, Australians have done well to quickly change their behaviours and adapt to staying at home. We have protected our most vulnerable, our health workers and the health systems. This has helped to flatten the curve in Australia. One of the many positive opportunities emerging from this crisis is holding on to behaviours such as driving less, flying less, remote work meetings, growing food and having more time to do things. As a result of our reduced activity, there has been a drop in global carbon emissions. But as we return to our new normal lives, the environmental impact will return and may even increase as we rebuild our economies. Our governments and industry have a responsibility to choose sustainable development in rebuilding and have a better chance to flatten the global emissions curve so we can all have a safe planet. As individuals, we can also have an impact, and we'll talk about the ways for you to do this throughout our presentation. The health crisis and our forced shutdown is being seen by many as an opportunity to rebuild with sustainable development that lessens the pollution and lasting impacts of greenhouse gases. An example of this is increasing the use of renewable energy and electric vehicles whilst creating jobs in these sectors. And that's where we come in. We're here to share our knowledge about CERES and share the tips and tricks we have learnt along the way to have as minimal impact on the earth as possible. Let me tell you a little bit about CERES. We're based in Brunswick East on a 4-hectare site reclaimed from landfill. We began in 1982, and today we are a thriving community organisation with an organic farm, many social enterprises, and the largest provider of environmental education in Victoria. hope you've enjoyed the introduction to this presentation. Now I'm going to share some tips with you on backyard food growing, composting and ways to shop locally. But even if you don't grow your own food, going to a farmer's market, ordering a fresh food box full of local and regional produce are both excellent ways to make a connection to where your food comes from. And in the process, you're supporting local farmers and local businesses. So let's get into it. Our chapter on local food kicks off with some tips on growing food. In this slide, I emphasise composting, because if you consider compost as a multivitamin for your soil, it is the foundation of a healthy plant. Alongside the requirements of sun and water, nutrients in a healthy soil are required to successfully grow food. Compost can help to adjust pH levels, add beneficial bacteria, and retain plant moisture. Choosing plants suited to your local climate is another key way to have success in growing plants. Australia's climate zones from the north to the south are further differentiated at the local level. In addition to using a plant finder tool to help you choose plants suited to your area, growing plants to suit the season is important. Now, you can purchase good quality compost, but making your own from food scraps and garden clippings is free and fun. Here are some examples of compost and worm farm systems. There are a few tips to be successful for all of these systems. One is adding small amounts of food scraps to start with. The second is always add some shredded or torn up paper, dried leaves or straw when you add food. This is known as a nitrogen to carbon ratio. If you add 1 part food, the nitrogen, to 4 parts of dried material like paper, the carbon, this is a wonderful ratio that will help keep your compost or worm farm in balance. In addition to making your compost, you can also use curbside organic bin if your council provides this. Whichever way you go, the main point is to keep your food scraps and garden prunings out of your landfill bin, as this creates a potent greenhouse gas called methane. This slide illustrates the many ways you can grow, from potatoes in a hessian sack to herbs in your balcony to full garden beds. Growing your food using organic methods has many benefits for people, plants, animals and soil. Starting with healthy soil, here are many ways to support healthy plants and the insects and other animal life connected to your garden. There are many ways to source, grow and swap food in your local and regional area. But it does take an intentional mind shift to change your shopping behaviours. But growing your own food or shopping at a farmer's market or buying a seasonal organic food box is a great way to start. This pyramid is a simple guide to shopping locally to support sustainably focused and family-owned businesses. This resource list includes community gardens in your local area, Costa's tips for composting, and gardening supplies in your region. Next up, we've got a video showing one backyard food growing. I hope you find this an inspiration to growing your own food. I hope you've enjoyed that backyard garden tour. This example shows the diversity of food that can be grown in one suburban site. There are established fruit trees providing bounty to be eaten in season or bottled to be enjoyed later, a crop of seasonal veggies, medicinal plants and edible flowers and herbs. And of course there is a compost to take care of any food scraps and return the nutrients back to the soil. And now from the garden to the kitchen, we're now going to share an inspirational video about making bread and observing Earth Hour in the process. We hope you enjoy it.
See you in the morning. Bye.
I really enjoyed talking to you about growing food and ways to shop for food locally. I'll hand over to Leah now to talk about ways to reduce waste.
Thanks, Jane. It's great to see how we can incorporate all of those sustainable food choices into our everyday lives to create healthy people and a healthy environment. It also ties in perfectly with our next chapter, which is, of course, waste. Chapter 2, Less Waste. Over the last couple of years, it is undeniable Victoria has faced a number of different challenges around waste. Our old ways of exporting the problem overseas were stopped in their tracks, and Australia was forced to be held accountable for its waste infrastructure, or lack thereof. Now, learning from our past downfalls, Victoria is working towards a 2030 waste vision, where we will see the implementation of new household waste streams, reducing our waste to landfill and transforming our idea of waste into a resource. Within the following slides, we will jump into a few specific waste streams, some new, some old, to better understand why they are important and how we, at an individual level, can utilise these to their full potential. Food waste recycling. In Victoria, around 50% of our garbage is made up of food and garden waste, with 65% of the wasted food still being edible. That's approximately $2,000 in food waste that is thrown away each year. Now, some of us may already be diverting our food waste from landfill with compost bins, worm farms, or food digesters, like Jane mentioned. However, for those of us that do not have the time for their upkeep, things just got a whole lot easier. In comes your new council curbside bin with a light green lid that your council will be implementing by the end of the month. This green lid will replace the dark green lid on your existing green waste bin and will be known as your FOGO bin, standing for Food Organics and Garden Organics. Along with this, you will receive a plastic kitchen caddy and compostable liners that you can use to transfer all food waste from your kitchen to the curb to get mixed in with your green garden waste, ready for its collection either weekly or fortnightly. And when I say all food waste, I really mean all. From fruit and veggie scraps to meat, poultry, seafood, and even bones and eggshells. While you're at it, you can even add any cooked leftovers that have gone to waste or even dirty tissues. All of these items are then transformed into FOGO fertiliser that is sold back into the community. By simply following the advice of your council for your FOGO bin, you can almost halve your waste to landfill and help contribute to a more sustainable waste system. Next up is our trusty old recycling bin for commingled waste, where we can put in medium and hard grade plastics, glass bottles or jars, paper and cardboard, as well as aluminium and steel cans. I'm sure all of which you are fairly familiar with. However, in your somewhat near future, recycling is going to be looking a little different with the introduction by 2030 of a fourth purple lidded bin, dedicated entirely to glass. Now, the amazing thing about glass is that it is 100% recyclable and can be recycled endlessly without losing its quality or purity. The not so great news is that it is becoming more and more of a contaminant in our commingled waste stream and can be difficult and hazardous to sort. Since the China import ban, recyclers are increasingly focused on quality and reducing contamination to maintain the value of their recyclable materials, hence the introduction of your fourth bin. Now, this purple lidded bin has already been rolled out in a number of council regions around Victoria, so keep an eye out for when it hits yours. So until we see this purple lidded glass bin, let's focus on doing the best job we can with our current recycling by following a few helpful tips, including separating lids from plastic bottles and glass jars, collecting alfoil until it is the size of our fists, and diverting soft plastics and tissues from your recycling into alternative waste streams. For more tips, please take a moment to read the tips listed on your screen. Now, sadly, as we spoke about before, soft plastic cannot be recycled in your commingled recycling bin. However, all is not lost. We can still divert soft plastics from entering our landfill sites by adding an extra collection stream at home, soft plastics. All you have to do is collect all of your soft plastic wrappers, making sure they are dry and clean, in one larger plastic bag. For me, old plastic shopping bags work great. And drop them off at any Coles or Woolworths where you see a collection point. If you are unsure about whether or not your product is hard or soft plastic, an easy way to tell is by giving it the scrunch test. If it scrunches down into a ball in your fist, it's likely soft plastic. A company called Repless then transforms the soft plastic into anything from park benches to fences, turning trash into treasure. This is also a super easy way to reduce individual waste to landfill and support the circular economy. And for a full list of what and what not to recycle, please check out our resource page at the end of this chapter. Another great way as individuals to reduce our waste sent from the home to landfill is by collecting specific items and taking them to drop-off collection points. This includes items such as plastic bottle tops, which I mentioned to collect earlier on in the presentation, bread tags, pens and markers, mobile phones and accessories, data storage, batteries, ink and toner cartridges, and computers and their accessories, all of which can either be made into new versions of themselves or totally new items altogether. For example, plastic bottle tops can be created into prosthetic hands by a company called Envision Hands, and bread tags can be created into wheelchairs. For more information, I encourage you to check out Officeworks, Aldi, and Australia Post for their extensive collection streams, as well as your local council and local primary schools, who often have a number of collections. TerraCycle and Planet Arc will also provide you with your local collections and their locations. Now, with all this talk regarding recycling our waste generated at home, I would quickly like to reiterate one thing. Recycling, sadly, is not the solution to our waste problem in Victoria. It is merely a band-aid solution. I often use this analogy with students I work with. If you come home to find your house is flooded, what is the first thing you would think to do? The most common answer is to locate the water source and turn it off. And it is the exact same situation with our overflow of waste. We actually have to do our best to rethink, refuse, reduce, and then further reuse, repurpose, and even repair before we think about recycling. We have to stop over-packaging in its tracks and vote with our dollar to reduce what we can at an individual level. And some helpful tips to help you do this include regrowing plants from your old veggies and fruit scraps, turning old clothes into rags or beeswax wraps, keeping reusable Tupperware in your car, and dropping off unwanted electrical waste at your council's collection points. For more tips for reducing waste, please take a moment to read the tips listed on your screen. And now our lovely colleague Dee will take you through how you can create your own reusable beeswax wraps at home to reduce clothing waste and replace single-use plastics. And for more information on ways to reduce waste generated within your home, as well as information on your local drop-off points, please check out the links provided on this resource page. Now, I hope you found this chapter on waste informative and will be able to incorporate some of these individual tips and tricks into your everyday lives. I'm now going to pass you back over to Jane, who will discuss how you can lower your greenhouse gas emissions through your energy choices.
We've talked about growing food, shopping locally, reducing waste, and valuing resources. In this chapter, we'll talk about choosing sustainable energy and transport and helping our environment even more. Okay, let's do it. Australia is leading the world in per capita growth of rooftop solar, with new panels installed about every 6.5 minutes. By 2025, renewable energy is predicted to supply up to 75% of the nation's power. In addition to growth in solar panels, there needs to be more investment in grid infrastructure and batteries. South Australia is leading the way in rooftop solar and battery storage, and Tasmania through a mixture of hydrogen, wind, and solar energy production. On a national scale, we are still far behind the rest of the world. Australia sources more of its power from fossil fuels than any other comparable countries in the world. We're not even in the top 10 for wind and solar capacity, despite being the sunniest and windiest inhabited continent. Australia has everything it could ever need to be a global energy superpower, but this will require the Australian government to invest in renewing the nation's future. As consumers at home and in business, we can all support Australia's transition to renewable energy through buying renewable energy to power your home. and business as part of your electricity bill. Another key action you can take is to move your banking, superannuation and insurance to funds that are not investing in fossil fuels. Whether you're with AGL, Origin or PowerShop or any of the other energy retailers, they can provide you with clean electricity to power your home and business. Green Electricity Guide is a handy tool to look at the performance of different energy retailers. Market Forces is an easy tool to see where your money is linked to fossil fuels. By taking the steps to move your money to institutions that are supporting renewable energy is an extremely important action. Coming up, we've got a video of CERES Eco House to show some tips for energy reduction in a home.
This is the CERES Eco House. It was moved to the CERES site in the early 80s and has been renovated several times. The Eco House has been a showcase to the public in terms of energy efficient housing, and today we'll have a brief look at some of the simple technologies it uses. The entrance has dual doors to form an airlock. This prevents air from escaping when a person comes into the building. The majority of energy use in Victorian housing goes towards heating during the colder months. Skylights allow for natural lighting. A layer of bubble wrap above the fitting helps to prevent heat leaking back outside as well. There is secondary glazing over the original windows called plexiglass, which is very strong. This can be used on any window and is 70 to 80% as good as double glazing, with huge reduction in costs. Another secondary glazing technology is heat shrink plastic, which is very cheap. The film can be cut and fitted to a window and then attached with the use of a hairdryer. Again, it is 70 to 80% as good as double glazing. Externally, there are blinds to trap the heat in during winter and reflect sunlight away during summer. The garden provides shade during summer, but as the plants are deciduous, they shed their leaves and prevent obstruction of the sun in winter. The seals of the windows and doors are tightly fitted to prevent drafts. The back of the building uses thermal mass to store heat. An internal brick wall captures heat from sunlight through high clerestory windows and releases it back into the building at night. By using a solar system and batteries, as well as a heat pump and geothermal technology, our Eco House is a zero-emissions, all-electric house. The batteries allow the capture of solar power for use at night. We hope you have enjoyed this brief glimpse into our CERES Eco House.
During COVID-19, with our cars and trucks off the road, pollution and greenhouse gases have decreased substantially. The second biggest decrease during this time came from the pause in industries such as steel and cement. This is in New Delhi in October 2019 and April 2020. New Delhi is the world's most polluted city with life-threatening pollution. During the restrictions, New Delhi's pollution levels were the best in decades and the skies were a rare blue. How can we use this moment to reflect on what transport methods we should prioritise to help keep the air clean? What riding, walking, public transport, cycling, carpooling will you choose to take going forward? I hope this chapter on energy and transport has shown some ways you can help to reduce Australia's pollution and adopt a cleaner approach to energy. Now Leah is going to share some tips on water saving and show you just how precious fresh water is.
Thanks, Jane. Now in Victoria, we are extremely lucky to have fresh running water available at the quick turn of a tap. However, sadly, this is not a luxury that all regions and countries have. So in this next chapter, let's find out just how precious our water is and ways in which we can conserve it. Chapter 4, Precious Water. Now, the reason water is so precious is because if we actually zoom out all the way to view our planet Earth, 97.5% of the water available on Earth is actually made up of salt water. That only leaves 2.5% water that is actually fresh water, which before we get too ahead of ourselves is mostly unattainable. 70% of this is frozen in polar caps and 30% lies underground, most of which is too expensive to tap into and filter. This then only leaves less than 1% of fresh water available for human consumption. This fresh water that is available is then consumed in many different ways around the home, from washing our dishes, clothes, and bodies to flushing the toilet. But is all water consumed within our homes visible to the eye? Our individual consumption of water is probably much higher than we would ever imagine, and that is due to invisible water or water used in the manufacturing process of everything that we buy and use. This includes all the food that we put into our mouths, to the clothes we put onto our bodies, and the appliances we use in our daily lives. To grow just one orange, it requires approximately 52 litres of water and around 720 litres for just one pair of cotton socks. So in the next part of our presentation, we will be investigating how our individual consumer choices can increase or decrease our water consumption and help us make more informed choices. Plant-based diets. Now, the fact of the matter is that in order for our food to grow, it consumes water, and a lot of it. And according to the United Nations, meat production and factory farming are responsible for a majority of that. That's around 70% of freshwater consumption, as well as 38% of land use. That's deforestation, and 19% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. Now, obviously, all food attributes to land use as well as greenhouse gas emissions, but the problem lies in the sheer scale of the meat industry and the fact that land and water is used both in firstly growing the grain to feed the industry, as well as the water and land used to house the livestock itself. I invite you to look over the image on the right-hand side of the screen to see the different litres of water required to produce just 1 gram of the listed source of protein. It is important to understand that as individuals, we do not have to completely change our eating habits or eliminate whole food groups, but we do have to hold ourselves accountable for the effects that they can have on our planet. Simple swaps throughout the week or incorporating meatless Mondays can be simple yet effective ways to reduce water-hungry foods with lesser ones. Now up next are our own fashion choices. Here's a crazy fact. It takes 2,700 litres of water to produce 1 cotton t-shirt. That's nearly 4 times the cotton socks I mentioned earlier. That's around about how much water you will drink in over 3 years. Making clothes takes a huge amount of resources, and sadly, so much of our clothing ends up unloved or in our wardrobes and never worn. Our fast fashion culture today is also designed for a quick turnover of cheap products that results in extensive water consumption and pollution caused by the dyeing process. So I want to challenge you to rethink how you buy, wear, and repurpose your garments through ways such as switching to less resource-hungry fibres, buying second-hand where possible, supporting environmentally conscious brands, and rather than binning old clothes, taking them to textile banks for recycling or donating wearable goods to op shops. Now, after all this invisible water talk, I thought it best we finish up with taking a look at the water we can physically see within the home. Now, as you can see in this image, our water consumption can be broken up into 8 main categories. And these include 2% of water is used on drinking, 4% on outside use, 8% on washing clothes, 9% on other, 11% on taps, 12% on washing dishes, 23% on flushing toilets, and 31% on shower and baths. So now that we have an understanding of how our water is used in the home, let's jump into some ways to reduce these percentages and form some water saving habits. We can start off by catching runoff in the shower or kitchen sink by placing buckets or large containers underneath. We can even retrofit old single flush toilets with glass jars, as well as always using quick or eco washers, planting native and mulching garden beds, and even harvesting rainwater by implementing rain tanks. And for more information on ways you can conserve water within the home, please check out the links provided on this resource page. Now, I hope these points on water have highlighted just how precious it is on our earth and have provided you with some ways to conserve it within your own home. Now, that's all you'll be hearing from me today, as we have come to the end of our presentation. So I'd just like to say a really big warm thank you to everybody who has joined us here virtually today, and I wish you the best of luck on your sustainability journey. Now I'll pass you back to Jane for her to say her goodbyes.
It's been great to talk with you about ways to live more sustainably and take care of our environment. There are daily choices we can all make which benefit our environment and take action on climate change. Thank you again to the City of Kingston for making this presentation possible for the community. We hope you've enjoyed watching, and we look forward to seeing you at CERES.